Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 6-time author, and I help people write and publish powerful, thought-provoking nonfiction and memoir without any more overthinking, second-guessing, or overwhelm than absolutely necessary. Because let's face it, some overthinking, second-guessing, and overwhelm is going to come with the territory if you're anything like me. I believe that story and shared perspective is one of the most potent ways we connect with one another, and that your story, perspective, and insights are destined to become someone else's favorite resource. For more book writing, publishing, and how the heck do I move through this glitch tips and solutions, and plenty of free and low-cost resources, visit publishaprofitableBook.com. And for recommendations of fabulous books you've possibly never heard of, book writing inspiration, and the occasional meme so relatable you'll wonder if it was created with you in mind, follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author. Well, hello, and welcome to this next episode of Write the Damn Book Already. Once again, through the magic of Instagram. It seems like all of my guests are coming through the magic of Instagram, and I am not mad about it. As much as we sometimes bemoan social media, and I am over here bemoaning right along with you, I have met some of the most amazing people, many of whom have turned into what I consider friends. I don't know if they consider me their friends, but I consider them mine. Many have turned into friends, and it did not take long for Cara Sapida to do exactly that. I don't remember exactly how we got connected, as I pretty much never do, but I immediately knew I wanted to speak to her about her new book. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, titled Not the Breast Year of My Life. And it details her journey, and journey is a word that she does not love. It details her experience navigating triple negative breast cancer, a diagnosis that unfortunately came, at all, but also along with a whole slew of other things that were going on in her life. And I knew I wanted to interview her, but I was not prepared for how remarkably I was affected by her book. She is a news anchor for WPXI in Pittsburgh, which is the NBC affiliate in Pittsburgh. And I think it's so interesting that we often we make assumptions and we have expectations when it comes to someone who is in the public eye every single day and how they might handle certain things or how they might be comfortable going and putting themselves out there as a writer, as an author. And as typically happens, when I talked to Cara about her experience, I was surprised by her revelations when it came to what it felt like to go from behind the camera to behind the pen. Why she did it when there is no shortage of books on the market for people going through breast cancer or people who are wanting to support their loved ones through this horrific disease. What kind of support she received and what kind of pushback even she received that surprised not only her, but frankly me. I'm just so incredibly grateful that she pushed through. And even though if you know me, you know I don't necessarily encourage pushing through. But in this case, whatever it took to get this book on the market, I am so, so glad that she did it. And I know you're going to benefit from and enjoy so greatly hearing her story and learning what it actually took to get this book out in front of other people with the hope that it would help just one other person, which it has done many, many times over. In just her first 2 weeks on the market, she has already sold an incredible number of books. In fact, at the end of our interview, she asked me privately, she told me what the number was. I'm not going to reveal it because that's not my place, but she said, "Is this good?" And I said, "Oh my God, this is incredible." And the fact that so much of social media would have you believing that this isn't good is incredible. I mean, selling it or giving it to one person who it so greatly affected is enough for most of us, but she has already done that many times over. And as she shares in the interview, she has been completely bowled over by the ways that the book has already transformed other people and affected other people. And they're, in many cases, ways that she did not even anticipate. So let me stop talking so she can start talking. You can find all of her links, including the link to her book, Not the Breast Year of My Life, can be found in the show notes. But again, if you're lying on the couch and not driving and want to look her up and follow her right now, you can do so on Instagram at Cara, it's Cara, Sapida, S as in Sam, AP as in Paul, ID like dog, A. If my way of spelling that out just took your brain for a complete loop, just go ahead and check the show notes. The link is right there for you. All right, everybody meet Cara Sapida. As I mentioned to you, I blew through this book and I didn't mean to. I woke up this morning and you were so sweet to book so fast. And I woke up and I thought, well, I'm just going to read the intro so I have a somewhat intelligent place from which to start. And I couldn't stop. And to be clear also, and this is just fully I don't know if it's a vulnerable, it's just an admission is what it is. I am afraid sometimes of books like this. I am a hypochondriac and I'm also a believer in, I'm putting air quotes here, but manifesting things. And so I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but there was a piece of me that thought, oh my gosh, if I immerse myself in this, am I going to start questioning things? And I didn't, because it is what a great resource. And we'll talk more about it, but just what an incredible read. I literally front to back 3 hours. I just sat down and did nothing else. So first of all, thank you so much for writing it. And I can imagine, but I don't want to assume why you did it. And the way I want to ask the question, instead of saying why, what compelled you to write this book? Because the answer is really pretty obvious. But what I hear a lot of people say is there are so many books already on the market on this topic.
Correct.
Right? So what compelled you to do another one?
So that's an excellent question. I knew very early in my breast cancer journey, so to speak, I hate to call it a journey, but sometimes you have no choice because there's no other word for it.
That's one of the questions on my list. Yeah. So thank you for loading that up for me.
Through that experience, I knew early on, I said, why did you give a journalist breast cancer if she's not meant to write about it? And I identify as a writer more than a journalist, right? I have loved writing my whole life. I mostly identify as a mother, but after that, people assume that I identify as a television news reporter, but actually I love writing. And that's my favorite part of the job, right? Is to tell people stories. And so I started writing pretty early on in the experience, and I would just share it as a little blog post here on Facebook and Instagram. And then I was super sick, so I wouldn't check on it for a week. And when I would go back to write the next one, I would start to thank everybody and realize that blog had went far and wide. And there were people all around the world messaging me, husbands in other countries saying, thank you for this post. I can understand a little bit more about what my wife is going through, and women saying the same thing. And so I found connection through writing, and I thought, I'm just going to keep this going. And I'm going to take the blog posts as a jumping off point, and I'm going to write a book.
And just keep going. So one of the things that you mentioned in the book was that there were times when you would post and then you had to be good about filtering out the comments. And what I'm finding interesting about this is how relatable. I don't remember if I read it in the blurb about the book or if I read it. I don't remember where I read it, is my admission here. But basically the concept that you don't have to be going through breast cancer or even supporting someone through breast cancer. You had so many things going on in your life when you were diagnosed. You were in the middle of a divorce. You had 2 very young children, all of this, that it's such a great outlook or perspective shift for people going through anything challenging. And so when you said you had to really filter out some of the comments that you were getting on your posts because you didn't want to hear all the horror stories, but also I'm curious, that makes perfect sense. And authors have to do that too. It's completely different, obviously, but I'm curious how you felt about those days when you couldn't reply, either emotionally or physically, you just couldn't reply. Did that get at you at all? Because you worried about what people would think?
So I was afraid right early on of the stories. Everybody has a story. Somebody was nice enough to drop off meals at my front porch door when I was very, very sick. And while I was thanking her gratefully from like the bottom of my heart, her husband was like, my first wife died of breast cancer. Oh. And I remember saying, okay, well, thanks for coming and have a nice day. And I closed my door slowly. And it's those same stories that when you read them in comment form, they impact you in a similar fashion, and I was so afraid of the stories, and I wanted to write a book that exuded a raw and real look at breast cancer, but also remained positive. And so I tried my best to do that. But I also had been going through other hardships. And I learned along the way that as humans, we experience layers of hardship. Many people that I met were going through breast cancer while going through another hardship. And so now that the book is out there in the world, I am truly amazed at the people who have reached out and to tell me the way that it affected that how they received my book, which was nowhere on my radar. A woman said, I just want you to know that I read your book and I have never had cancer, but I was let go from my job the same week that my ex-husband walked out. And it was also the same week that my mother, who had Alzheimer's, didn't recognize me for the first time.
Oh, heaven.
And she said, I cried throughout your book because I can relate to layers of hardship. And then of course that made me cry. And that connection though is what we're all looking for in life to feel.
Well, and you were in the middle of the pandemic. So you had that layer too, right? Because there was layer. And I just remember, Cara, as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, gosh, so many of us were, and this isn't meant to, pit one challenge against another, like which one is worse. But nevertheless, so many of us were struggling through the pandemic with lack of connection. And all of a sudden, I just had this moment where I thought, but to be going through that, right? And truly not being able to hug people, not just because it's a conscious choice, but because your life is kind of hanging in the balance. If
it was extremely lonely, right? I kept visualizing what it would be like to go through breast cancer, not during COVID times, and have, your best friend show up for a movie night and cuddle in bed with you, or go to like a group meeting and there would be women sitting around with their bald heads and drinking coffee that tastes bad because we all have metal mouth from chemo. And I just kept envisioning it and longing for it. And not only did I not have that, my friends would like sit in my driveway and talk to me because my counts were so low. And unless you go through an experience like this, you have no idea the concept of what it really means to be immunocompromised. I think that word got thrown around a lot during, COVID times. But for me, I learned what neutrophils are, and those are your first line of defense against an infection. And at one point I had like 0.0001. which is as low as you could possibly go. And so they made it very clear, you cannot get sick. Not only can you not get COVID, you can't get anything. So I couldn't get chemo that week. I had to skip chemo because even chemo itself could hurt me. And so that's pretty low. And then, you reach out to these support groups and that's totally normal. They all go through that, but during COVID times, it just took on a level. So it was so lonely. Yes. It was so lonely. And luckily, though, writing gave me these connections from women around the world. And so it helped take the edge off the loneliness, I think, a little bit, which we're all looking for.
Well, I think that connection, it's a word that I hear over and I use it a lot too, because I'm an introvert and I even learned during COVID, okay, I'm an introvert to a point. Like, I think even introverts are introverts to a point. It was like, this is like enough of my own voice, enough of my own everything. You mentioned
maybe you're an ambivert. Maybe you're, I always say I'm an ambivert. So I have introvert qualities and extrovert qualities. So people keep asking if I'm going to have a book signing. And I was saying, I think I'm going to have a book reading, not necessarily a book signing. And people just don't understand that. And I said, if you're an introvert, you'll understand it because, while I want to celebrate the book and all the connections I've made and all the people that are relating to it, I also don't want to just sit there and be like the center of attention while I sign books. That causes me anxiety. But mingling and having conversation, I also enjoy. So I identify as an ambivert.
That's super interesting. And so along those lines, maybe I am an ambivert. I kind of like that. All right. I'm going to attribute that to you from now on. Like Cara says, maybe I'm an ambivert. So I'm going to go with that. So when you think about a book signing, because this is something we talk about a lot, what authors are often like, what should I do? So-and-so, my publicist or my publisher or my best friend or this other person in this author group says I should do XYZ. And oftentimes we feel like, but I don't wanna. Like, I don't want to do that. So tell me, for you, what is the difference that feels better between a signing and a reading? Because in both cases, you're still in front of people, right?
I mean, to tell you that I've been asking myself this question for a week. So, and last night there was a knock at my door, and it was my next door neighbor, and she had a book in her hands, and she was like, my coworker would like you to sign this. And it's a male coworker whose 88-year-old mother had breast cancer. And, she said they both read it. They both cried through it. And here's a little note how to spell her name. Please sign it. And I'm like, okay, I guess it feels weird because I am an author, but I'm not an author. I'm a journalist and I'm a mom, and now I'm suddenly an author. So I don't know. It feels so weird to be asked to sign a book. I wasn't
so
prepared
interesting
for it.
Because as a journalist, as an anchor, I love it though, because it's just not what you would expect. And people would assume and expect that you're totally comfortable.
Yeah.
But this is just a totally different role, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about this. I am an author, but I'm not an author.
Right. So, well, my mom likes to tell people that when I was in second grade, my teacher said, you're going to be an author someday. And at the end of the year, she gave me tickets to the circus and a little white envelope. And it said, remember me when you publish your first book.
Oh my God.
I know. And I get choked up about it because did I think that it would be breast cancer that led me to publish my first book? Never. And I think of all the books I've written over the years that I, didn't finish. I have started many, many books that I never finished. And there is something pretty profound about finishing this. And the fact that it's actually out there in the world and strangers are reading it and seeking me out to tell me their thoughts is incredible after so many unfinished books. So I guess I was always trying to be an author, a fiction author.
Okay.
And maybe now that I'm a published author, I'll write a fiction book.
So what was it about this one that compelled or pushed you to finish?
That's such a good question.
And you don't have to know the answer.
I guess because I already knew the ending, right? I was able to give it a beginning, middle, and end. And I worked really hard to make sure every paragraph, every chapter had a beginning, middle, and end as well.
And I think that's part of the reason I couldn't stop. Because, part of what it was too, it wasn't, so lots of times, especially with fiction, it's hard to stop because there's a cliffhanger left at the end of the chapter. With you, it was your chapter titles. They really intrigued me. So I'd get to the end of the chapter and I'd think, okay, I'm going to pause for a second and text the kid back who's been texting me incessantly as though it's a worldwide emergency. I'm quite sure it's not. Then I'd look at the next chapter title and I got to know what this is. So I just kept going. I think that it may be the first time I've ever said that.
I feel so honored. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was just, there were so many things. I mean, I think again, I've not experienced this reality, but to know how to be supportive, first of all, just to know that it's out there were it to ever happen is a beautiful thing. I'm so glad to know that it exists. I'm so glad to know that it exists if someone I know is in this situation. And I'm so glad to know for myself, I loved your chapters about everything pink, because this has been breast cancer is, correct me because I'm going to paraphrase this, but it's more than a pink ribbon.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. I felt like, people keep asking, what's the takeaway you want somebody to take from your book? And I'm quickly learning that there are so many different takeaways that I never expected people to tell me. And that's been beautiful. But for me, I really wanted people to close that book and think, I will not buy another glittery pink keychain ever again. I will not let some business profit off of allegedly raising awareness for breast cancer, and not a single dollar of that, not even a dime or a penny, is going to a breast cancer charity or research. And for me, that, God bless everybody that tried so hard to help me at my time in need, but we got a lot of that in my house. I mean, my dining room table was just covered, and I started like looking into it a little bit. Well, who profited off of this? Because not any women and not any groups, not, the Cleveland Clinic, none of the researchers. And so I think people are pretty aware. I think we can stop saying that we do this just to raise awareness. Everybody's aware of breast cancer, but what people don't know is that it is not pink ribbons. It's a very ugly disease. It is a vicious thief of a disease, and while medical advancements have come so far, it is still stealing our mothers, stealing our daughters, stealing our wives and our best friends. And so if we could just sort of call it what it is, a very ugly disease that affects mostly women, and not try to glamorize it anymore, then my book will have served a purpose.
And I think you did that so beautifully. You didn't gloss over the hard stuff, but you didn't make it, I wouldn't be outright terrified if I were to read it. My very first book was born from not a similar circumstance, but similar in the sense that I found out I was expecting twins. I went to the bookstore. I bought every book, much like you did.
Yes.
And I got home and it was like, your life is over. And so when I wrote the book, I felt like I wanted to be honest about, this isn't going to be necessarily easy street, but your life, I mean, it's hard for me in this moment because I don't want it to sound in any way like I'm comparing these two things, but that was why I too wanted to write the book. And that was my goal, was for people to have a reality, but not be terrified. And you just did that so well.
I love that you said that. No, it's great to compare those two things, because I feel like any woman who's pregnant with twins wants to hear that, right? That's what they want to hear. You know what? You can manage this. This is manageable. Let's give you the honest feedback about where you're headed and where it's going. That's what I tried to do as well.
Yep.
But that it's manageable. And I hope that I shed a light on all of the beautiful moments that I had through the ugliest days, and the people who say that they laugh and cry on every page, that is what has caught me off guard. The men and women who say that they laugh and cry. I'm glad that I could let my sense of humor shine through, because I think that laughter is a great coping mechanism, and people are afraid to we can laugh about this,
Yes.
We can laugh about the craziest things that happen. And, but then we can also cry the very next paragraph. I'm fine with that.
Well, and I got goosebumps so many times. I laughed a lot and I got goosebumps so many times because you had these, and see the air quotes, but these coincidences. And I don't believe in coincidence. I don't think you do either, right? That happened over the course of this, with sayings that popped up in one place and then they popped up again in another place, or just gentle reminders from a higher power, another power, whatever people refer to that as, that there are, I don't want to say, I'm stuck right now, even in this interview, because I don't want to say things that are trite, like everything's going to be okay and all these sorts of things.
It all is interconnected, like the thoughts of how you manifest things and how you want to put good energy into the universe so that you can bring in good energy and not allow that negative energy. And then these coincidences that I say are these God winks. What are these? It is just some of the things that happened to me during that time period are just too coincidental. They didn't add up for me to think that there wasn't some higher power watching over me through this process. And I felt it in so many ways, especially considering that anything could happen, during a global pandemic to make you feel this way. But I wanted to say something about what you said earlier about, there's so many breast cancer books on the market, right? And when I knew I was coming on your podcast, I thought to myself, how honest do I want to be about the difficulties with publishing? And I was this morning, I was thinking, and I don't know if anybody else who's listening to this, who's trying to self-publish, has experienced naysayers, but I want to say that I had some naysayers along the way. And if I didn't take this opportunity to tell people that you can do this, The few people I spoke to in the publishing world really, really like took the wind out of my sails. For example, I thought I was going to publish this a year ago, one January ago, when a person in the publishing world said, this just isn't original enough. I wouldn't take it to any agent and I wouldn't take it to any publisher. This isn't original enough. And so I thought, okay, then I won't. Then I'll self-publish. But now everybody's like, well, why didn't you take this to an agent or a publisher? And then, So I self-published. And then the week before I self-published, I had some people in the literary world say, don't be surprised if this book is dead in the water. Don't be surprised if nobody buys this book, and like these kind of things. I'm
horrified that anyone in the literary world would say that but continue.
So, I felt like I have to believe in the power of storytelling, and I have to believe in myself as a writer. And so I felt okay self-publishing. I didn't know what the literary world thought of self-publishing, to be honest, which I'm glad I didn't until after the fact.
Right.
But I'm so proud of this book, and I am so proud of, the way it's being received. My biggest fear was how it would be received. And luckily, my biggest fear wasn't what people thought of self-publishing, because I didn't know. And
being naive is sometimes the greatest gift ever.
It was a blessing. It was a blessing in disguise, So I let it was like, somebody was like, stop calling your book a little book. But it was like my little book, let it fly and see what it can do.
Right.
And
I love so much that you brought this up. It's on my list of things to ask you about. Yes, because I always ask, I don't like being in superlatives, but really I always ask self-published authors why, and it's not a challenging question. It's truly like, tell me why they didn't seek out an agent and a publishing house. And I also ask traditionally published authors if they ever considered self-publishing. And I love the honesty that's coming through from guests on both fronts. The fact of the matter is that it's the craziest industry that people even in the industry can imagine. And things are changing so much. And yes, the stigma, air quotes, around self-publishing is still incredibly strong because the barrier to entry is zero.
Correct.
But if you're willing to put together a, air quotes again, good book, like if you're really in it for the air quotes right reasons, then it's to greenlight yourself is one of the greatest gifts, not only to yourself, but to everyone now who's read the book. And it's not caught up in all this red tape of people saying, I just don't think this is original enough. I don't think this will make us enough money. And they're running a business.
Yeah.
So I get that. But I really commend you for believing in it enough, because look what's happened.
Right. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for saying that, because you're immersed in the book publishing world. And so I value your opinion and I appreciate you saying that. Once I let a couple of friends read it that either were in the middle of treatment or were survivors working to heal, and just to get their perspective, because really that's what mattered to me, was what those women thought, not anybody in the literary world. And then one girlfriend who I knew is also a writer. And so I valued her opinion. So she called me at 11:30 p.m. one night, and she was crying so hard. And she was like, I don't read books. I wrote a book. I like to write, but I'm not a reader. And I did nothing today but read your book. I ignored my children. I ignored my husband. She was like, if you don't publish this, I'm going to be so mad at you. And then the feedback came from the women in treatment. And I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to have to bet on myself and take a leap of faith that maybe this will get into the hands of, if just a few women can hand this to their family members and say, this is how I feel, I think it will have been worth it.
100,000,000,000%, which is not a real number, but it's that true of a statement. And I think, this is honestly an entirely separate conversation that we could have for weeks, right? But it is a stumbling block for so many people who have something that they want to share And whether they're waiting on the validation of an agent or an editor, or they're waiting on the preconceived sort of assumptions and expectations of what that world brings. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, everyone's experience is different. Yeah. But nowadays, thank God, it is so possible for people, for stories to not be locked behind a door simply because some gatekeeper says, I don't think this is going to make us enough money, or I just don't think this is the right fit for me, which is completely fair.
Or the market's already saturated,
yes.
Right?
I love a saturated market. In my opinion, the market is saturated for a reason.
For a good reason. That's exactly right. There's room for all of us at the table, right? Yes. Especially because for me, this saturated market had a lot of books that didn't resonate with me.
There you go.
And so if it wasn't resonating with me, I'm pretty sure that it's not resonating with everybody.
Right.
And I knew that there was one single book that I loved, and I clutched. Actually, I had two books I loved. I loved a book of like handwritten letters from other survivors. Yes. I loved that, dear friend. And then I carried Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, with me. Yes. I have so many pictures just holding Untamed, and Glennon Doyle's obviously the best of the best when it comes to writing, but her chapters all, I believe, ended in a bang. And I'm not an author by trade. And so I didn't know if there was like a term for that. But I was like, but I like to write that way too. And so a couple of strangers reached out to me and they're like, I just love the way your chapters ended. And they described it in a different way. But I was like, oh, me and Glennon Doyle.
Well, and it's such a I don't know if it's a misnomer or just I'm going to make up a word, but a misthought that, there are writers who have been studying the craft of writing. I mean, I've been studying the craft of writing for decades. That in and of itself doesn't make you a writer. You still have to sit down and do it. So I think that there's this imposter syndrome, you can call it whatever you want, that creeps up. I mean, that's the most common term I hear, but that creeps up for people because they're like, I haven't been studying. My undergrad is in Japanese. Like, I didn't study to be.
Oh, watashi wa kara desu. News reporter Jean des. Hajimemashite.
See, I knew I was going to love you. Yeah. No, wait, how do you know this?
Oh my goodness, I'm sweating. So when I graduated college, my college boyfriend and I were going to teach in Japan together.
Oh
and
my
so
God.
We were studying Japanese to go teach English to Japanese students. And I got a phone call from a television market offering me a job. And I had to make a decision. It was a very difficult decision for me, but I ended up.
We might have met in Japan. I mean, I was only there for a brief blip, but nevertheless, that's amazing. Nobody knows. Everyone, it's like, you speak what? And I don't. And I mean, not anymore. And I don't know that I ever did terribly well, but it's been a long, long time. But the bottom line is I didn't study that.
Right.
So for all intents and purposes, I'm not a certified writer. I didn't have an MFA. I didn't go to Iowa Writers, whatever for the summer. I don't, but that is another thought that people have that just precludes them from. I mean, I interviewed a couple of weeks ago Megan Tatey, whose book Super Bloom.
Yeah, I just added it to my list. I was listening to your podcast.
She's amazing, and her book comes out today. Actually,
I saw that it came out today, and she said she took 8 years to write it.
8 years.
And I just felt that in my heart.
Yes.
Like talk about not giving up after 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know her, but I just want to wish her well today.
Oh, she's such a delight. And not only did it take 8 years, but the study of the craft. And, Neely Alexander is another new friend of mine whose book Love Buzz also, today's a big day, also comes out today. Today being May 2nd is the day we're recording this of 2023. And Neely was telling me as well, like she just dove into the study of, they both write fiction. How do we do this? And then just continuing to hone that. It's a muscle. It's a muscle that you just kind of keep strengthening and yeah.
So it's funny that you say that because I didn't take any of those classes and mine is a memoir. It's not fiction, but because I had the book finished 1 year ago and, that feedback sort of, took the wind out of my sails, but then it gave me another whole year to take another look at my book. And in that year, I think this is important. In that year, I was able to sort of like take that bird's eye view and say, okay, this is a memoir, but how can I make sure that it flows? Because people who love fiction like a book to flow. And even though my story is a linear story, I wanted to make sure that, the reader that I reveal, I don't know what any of the language is for this,
Doesn't
but
matter.
I made sure that I didn't, the original manuscript that I had 1 year ago, I gave it all away in chapter 1, right? Because why not? I'm a news reporter. That's what I do. You give the facts right out the door. You have a minute and a half to tell the story. And so I did. My first chapter told you everything you needed to know about what was coming through the rest of the book. And then I took the next year of my life to think about what I could remove from that and how I can slowly but surely tell my story that would keep the reader interested. So I say in my first chapter that I had experienced some hardships. And I don't say until my third chapter that I was going through a divorce, and so that's sort of, I try to think how a writer would think and work on flow. And I worked on the beginning, middle, and end, like I mentioned. And I think that that's important. And I'm glad I had that extra year.
And you absolutely did it. Like whatever the term is, it doesn't matter. We don't have to get clinical about it. When I work with writers who are writing memoirs specifically, and even nonfiction to a degree, but nonfiction's a little bit of a different beast from fiction and memoir. You were taught, or a teaching is, the hero's journey, right? As an arc. And there's a reason that that's taught. I mean, the best-selling movies and classic movies all the way back decades have used that same flow, that same arc to keep the watcher, the viewer, the reader, in the case of books, hooked. It's the same with memoir, right? It's this, in my opinion, it's that same flow. Again, if you give it all away in chapter 1, if they gave it all away in episode 1, I wouldn't have watched all, what was it? However many episodes of the new series, Working Moms.
Yes.
The whole thing in one day. Now, in my defense, they're only 20-minute episodes when you don't have commercials. Same with Firefly Lane. I don't know if you've seen that, but
I read the book.
Okay. Okay.
So
with the last, 9 episodes, I just got on my couch and didn't get back up because it is people, especially creative people, don't like to think, the news is formulaic, right? You've got to get that blip in 90 seconds.
I say that all the time. Yes.
Yep.
Formulaic.
The books are formulaic as well.
So it's funny because I don't know the hero's art. I don't know that.
Okay.
I'm not familiar. I'm fascinated. Now I'm going to look it up. But what I never expect to receive is the people saying they read it cover to cover. That was when I thought of like my wildest dreams for this book, that wasn't on my radar. And the first few people that told me would just leave me in tears, Yeah. I wasn't expecting that. But now I've heard it enough times that I'm just like, I'm so humbled by it. And hearing you say that there's like a reason people, continue to read. I didn't know that I could achieve that with my little book. And I still don't know the reason. Maybe it's your arch that you described, but it's amazing to me.
For me, it was that, and it was also just your personality, just the candor. And again, it was such a beautiful, beautiful balance between truth and comfort. And, when you talk about like the Red Devil and, things that, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it was just, it's like, let me give you you know what it reminds me of? I don't know if you've ever, I hope not, but if your kids have ever been in the hospital and they have, at our children's hospital here, they have child life specialists.
Okay.
And they usually have an undergrad in psych or something similar, and then they're working on their master's or something, but their job is to come in and let the child know exactly what's going to happen. And they don't lie. They will tell them this is not going to feel good, or this is going to hurt, but they do it. The children build this incredible trust with them because they're honest, but they're there. Like the compassion is there, the fun is there. They've got the toys, they've got whatever they need, and they're energetically, emotionally there. That is what you are in this book.
I can relate to that because when I set out to write this, I can remember still the women in my life that were that person for me. The person you just described from Children's Hospital, I had 5 or 6 women here in Pittsburgh who had recently finished chemo. They were back to their lives and they were answering my texts and my calls morning, noon, and night. And I realized that the feedback and the advice and the insight that they were providing for me is what I'd been looking for in these damn books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm searching these books like a crazy person.
Yeah.
And I'm finding statistics and medical jargon. And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for hope. And these women are giving me hope. And so how can I write a book to give hope to other women?
Yes.
And that's what I set out to do.
But with honesty.
Yeah. And I think I say like multiple times throughout the book, that advancements have come very, very far. And we are so grateful for that. Yeah. But it is still a thief of a disease because we have to be honest about it. And so many of us go through this and we lose someone. And it is just devastating. It is just rock bottom, as devastating as it gets for women in the breast cancer world.
Absolutely. I have 2 more questions. One is a line from the book that struck me so much that I wrote it down. Okay. And the line is, misery doesn't love company, it craves compassion.
Yes. So that's about when I decided to take off my wig.
Yes.
I had a brand new, beautiful wig that cost more than my mortgage. And I felt so beautiful in it for the first time in a long time. And I had it on and I put on some makeup, even though I didn't have any eyelashes, and I was going to Target and I kept checking myself out in the rearview mirror. I'm like, you could almost envision that I'm back to my old self. And then I parked, and for some reason, I just didn't get out of the car. And I thought, this is inauthentic. This is not who I am right now. And what if I pass somebody in the grocery aisle and she's bald and we could have shared a moment? And that's when I realized, like, misery doesn't love company, but it does seek compassion. It seeks connection. And I'm going to be who I am right now. And maybe when I'm past chemo and back to my life and I want to accelerate the hair growth process, then I can wear this wig. But for now, I'm just going to be myself. And then, this is a true story, I walked into that Target and I caught a glimpse of myself in the Target window after having looked at myself in that rearview mirror. And I said, even if I don't see another cancer fighter today, I see myself.
That line I highlighted. That was a piece of the book where I got weepy, and I don't get weepy, Cara. I do not get weepy. And I did, because I thought, oh my God, like what an incredibly beautiful gift to give yourself, but also to give everybody else in there, like not to hide and to just be willing to say, here we are.
This is here. And you can do that whether you have cancer or not, right? It's like that. The same goes for going through a divorce. You just never know who needs to hear your story and who else is, going through hard times. We don't always have to put on a brave face.
Right. Or a filter.
Right?
Some days I like the filters, but some days I think, you know what? Here we are. All the wrinkles, all the freckles, all the everythings. Here we are. We're not going to hide any of it.
On those days, you know what I say to myself? Aging is a gift.
Yeah. And I loved that point that you made. You made it in the book as well. And I think that, I turned 50 this year.
Well, you look gorgeous.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. And it was challenging. I think even still now when I say I'm 50, I don't know why, but 50, I'll see for maybe a month prior to my birthday, I would see other people posting on Facebook saying, I'm celebrating my 50th. And my first thought was, you are so old. And then I was like, oh crap. Because in my brain, 50 feels, something other than what I feel. So
number 50.
But I did catch myself shortly before. And I thought, you know what, Liz, not everybody gets the chance to turn 50.
Yes.
This is amazing.
See, I turned 39. No, I turned 38 during chemo.
Okay.
And so I turned 40. It's so funny how the years fly by, but I believe I turned 40 then. And before cancer, I was dreading the big 40, right? I was dreading it. And how my perspective changed so drastically. I was like, please let me turn 40.
Yeah.
Please let me turn 40. Right. And so what a gift, because I truly could easily remember just a few months before that thinking, oh man, 40. Right. And that's another thing, that your perspective can change on a dime. And it's up to us to continue that, to take that forward momentum into the next chapter of our lives. Because even now I find myself slipping back into it,
Well, sure. And I think that's kind of a misconception as well, that like once you're past it, you do a beautiful job with that in the book as well, about just speaking to what is it like post-treatment and the fears and the guilt and the, how often you think about recurrence and things like that. I think that's something that I don't hear necessarily. I don't know. Is that an uncommon topic?
Well, that's another thing. Manuscript number 1, previous January, didn't have, the after. And I thought, this is a really big part of breast cancer, the healing. And I write, I shared this on my social media page. I said, we finish treatment and people just expect us to be better. And we are like deer on ice, just trying to find our footing. And we were connected to a medical team and, our oncologist and our surgeon, and we were getting all these checkups. And now it's just like, goodbye and good luck. And it's hard. The healing is hard. And I think that that's where a lot of women are struggling, because they're even afraid to admit that, hey, I'm very grateful for everything. I'm grateful to be alive and I'm grateful to be here, but I am struggling because my life is forever altered. My body is forever altered. And there's no map for how I should handle this.
Do you think that raises another question for me? Do you think, so you said in the book, and a lot of people have said this, that people don't know what to say when someone is first diagnosed. And so even with the best of intentions, a lot of things come out as cliche or trite, and it's not because they're trying to be, they just don't know. But now I'm starting to wonder, on the back end, does that happen too? Because people are often like, hey, you're done, you're good, you should be celebrating. Why are you not?
You were the first person to ask me that. That is a brilliant question. So I don't have the magical answers to what's the right thing to say, but I know for sure that empathy will always trump sympathy. So if you approach somebody who's going through cancer with empathy and not sympathy, or somebody who's working to heal without the tone of pity in your voice, you will get farther than if, for me, it's very hard because people mean so well, but they'll be like, how are you really doing? And that is like hard for me, because I'm like, I'm great. Thank you for asking, because as much as I want to spread awareness and I am hoping my book can help people, I also don't want this to define me. And I don't want this to define you or any other, person going through it. And so I think that I think that I'm speaking for a lot of women who don't know how to put this into words, but it is hard for us to handle the sympathy.
So I said my next question was going to be the last one, although it's very quick, but I lied, because another thing I had written down was that you said there's a chapter missing from the book. And that was on sympathy versus empathy. And I'd like you to speak to this, not me, but it had something, you didn't want to hurt feelings, or can you talk a little bit about why you left it out? Because it seems important.
I know. And it's such a gray area. It wasn't that I left it out intentionally. It was because every other chapter came to me naturally. Every other chapter felt as authentic as I could be from beginning, middle to end. But I am still working on how I feel about sympathy versus empathy. And no, do I want to write another book? I do not. Will I? Maybe. And maybe that's what I need to write about. But I would have held that book forever, not released it if I was trying to decide, because how do you explain to people the difference? And that's for a psychologist, not me.
Oh, and I love that because I think, sometimes with books, we get hung up on something and we do need to give it space to let ourselves work through it and understand it better so that we can write about it from a more powerful, understanding place. And sometimes we have to acknowledge that thing doesn't go in the book.
Yes.
It's just, it's not.
We can't always be the experts on everything. I know that as a journalist, like if I'm going to tell a story, I'd like to have one expert in every story, ideally. And I'd like to balance it with two if I can. You want to tell both sides of the story and bring in an expert, right? Well, for me, I'm going to tell you this whole story, but we're going to need to bring in an expert to decide what's the best way to handle sympathy versus empathy. I think that's also the only swear word in my book. I say, like, you just want people to say, like, I'm sorry, this effing sucks. Or maybe I don't think I actually said the F word.
I don't think you did. Because I definitely noticed. I'm always on the lookout for the F-bomb.
No, I don't think
it's my favorite.
I have the whole book memorized, but I think I just say, like, this freaking sucks. Like, I just think it, we know it sucks. We know there's nothing good you can say to us. But maybe the thing to say is I know this is horrific. If there's absolutely anything that you need, I'm here. I'm one phone call away.
I heard something once, and I'm troubled because I can't remember who said it right now. I'll remember it about 7 minutes after we conclude this, and then I will let you know and let everyone else know. But someone had said something along the lines of, a great thing to say is I know this sucks. I'm here with you in it.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful.
Beautiful. I'm willing to sit here with you in it, whatever that looks like.
Let's sit in this space together.
Like, it reminded me of your friend who came over and sat with you at the bottom of the stairs when you were just verklempt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. How fast can you get here?
And then I will not spoil what she did in her efforts to get there real fast, but it's pretty funny. That was the part of the book where I definitely laughed.
Did you laugh? Yeah.
Okay, last question.
That's one of the saddest chapters too, so I'm glad we can laugh through it, right?
Exactly. It was at a later point that you finally learned that had happened. Last question. We talked about all the pink shit. I mean, I'm just going to say, we talked about all that. Okay. In lieu of that, what are your personal favorite organizations, whether they're research organizations, patient support organizations that people can donate to?
Okay. So I think, number one, if you want to donate and help women, you have to find a local nonprofit in your community and find out what they're doing to help women who are in treatment or healing. A lot of times they provide mastectomy care packages because you need like a special pillow to have a mastectomy. And that's an easy way that you can make sure that your donation is going to help somebody. I donated, I created a mug that said "Fight Like a Mother," and it sold out within 2 hours. And so I donated 100% of those profits to the Cleveland Clinic's triple negative vaccine. But I did reach out to them first to ask, like, if I give you this donation, how much of it will go to the vaccine? And they said 100%. Okay. And that's what I wanted to hear. But before I did that, I had called other charities to find out what percentages they were giving, and the numbers were a little bit low. So there's some work that needs to be done there as well. Okay. So I would just encourage you to, I know that everybody is busy and we don't have a ton of time, but if you could just pick up the phone and ask before you donate to find out what percentage is going to actually help people or to help research, and then please donate. Yes. We encourage you to donate, but just make sure it's going to a real cause. And for sure, do not buy anything pink from a store unless there's a little label.
You don't need a pink blender.
No, you don't, because I can guarantee you that is not going to help anybody.
Right. Nor is it probably going to color coordinate well with your picture.
It's not going to color coordinate. Yes, you are not going to find pink. And, I love the color pink. I actually feel like breast cancer robbed me of loving a color, because now I don't want to love it anymore.
Right. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Cara, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was so enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.